Okay, so welcome everybody to Datamine's, one of Datamine's laboratory webinars, Investing in Quality and Why Budgeting for Laboratory Audits Pays Off. My name is Dion Borg. I'm the General Manager for LIMS here at Datamine, based in the Brisbane office, and joining me today is Rob Chapman, our Senior Laboratory Advisor. A little bit about myself for those people that haven't met me before. As I mentioned, I'm based in the Brisbane office. I have a chemistry background. I used to work in a nickel refinery in Townsville for about 10 years, and of 6 years of that time, I used to be the C-class administrator there. Really important, a lot of our teams do, team members do have chemistry backgrounds. That's really important because you need to understand how laboratories work to be able to configure a LIMS efficiently. So I've been working, with the C-class product. This year will be 15 years. So as the general manager, I look after the product globally through sales, consulting, support and R&D of the product. Every now and again, I get up and do some consulting. So the photo of me here with the team up in Porgera, a mine site in Papua New Guinea last year. So I visited the site and just helped them with an upgrade. So if you haven't connected with me, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Beck will pop my LinkedIn in your email. Please go ahead and connect with me if you haven't already. And I'll hand it over to Rob to introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. I've been with the labs for about 40 years, beginning in 1981, studying in a MET lab, travelling to Queensland after that, 2 years of training there. I went to a place called Ravenswood, which was run by City Resources, where I commissioned and ran the lab there for a couple of years prior to moving to Townsville, off to Kalgoorlie, then some work in the northern parts of Australia like Pine Creek, and then I moved over to international work, which was in Kazakhstan, commissioning a lab over there for an on-site company, and then they employed me there to run their laboratory for a couple of years before I became the Asia Central manager for minerals for SGS, leaving there a few years later to come back to Australia. So I've sort of worked around Australia on on-site labs and done a lot of design work and installation work for labs, as well as commissioning and running. I was operations manager at Intertech for 5 years, and that certainly gave me a good background into what the different laboratories can do. Okay, moving on. Next. Oh, you can connect to me on LinkedIn, I should say. Please, you're welcome to do so.
Thanks, Rob. So a couple of people have responded already, but as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, we're keen to get an understanding of, the people that we have in the webinar today. So feel free to answer that. Remember, it's all anonymous. So you can go ahead and answer those questions. And when we move forward to the next slide, that should still be available for people to continue to use. So it's good we got a little bit of a mixture of people on the call today, so that's great. So moving on to the next slide, back to you, Rob.
Thank you for that information. So what we're going to talk a bit about today is the role of a mine site laboratory. And that can be very different for each company, each mining company. It may depend on whether you're bauxite, gold, zinc, copper, lead. It could be also to do with sand mining. It could be a number of different operations that you're dealing with. But inevitably, the on-site lab is there because there's usually urgent information that's required, and it's required accurately. The implication of the lab results are impactful on the efficiency of the operation, and it often has a lot to do with the profitability of that operation. So the third part of that is that managing that data that comes out of the lab efficiently, fast, and accurately is impacting on all those previous items that I just mentioned. Next. So one of the key challenges for on-site labs is safety, as it is for all mine sites. There's a bit of a challenge there because we're handling a lot of chemicals. We're also handling some heavy materials because we're doing a lot of repetition work. We're handling and lifting. We're touching hot equipment such as dryers, furnaces, like fire assay, and hot plates, obviously, in your digest area. So one of these things is we need to make sure we manage our chemicals well. We need to separate our reductants and oxidants, for instance. Our handling, we need to make sure that we're wearing appropriate PPE. And we also need to be aware of what we're throwing out into waste, how we throw it into waste. And there needs to be processes of documenting where that waste is thrown away so that you're not going to harm anybody. The other thing that's important in a lab is to know, obviously, where to evacuate and how to evacuate. It needs to be visible, so there needs to be good signage. The safety equipment and PPE needs to be available, needs to be in good condition, and it must be ready for use. So that's one of the things that obviously your supervisors and managers need to take care of. If you have an issue with that, then you need to be prepared to bring it up to your management team as well. The equipment itself that we use, the crushers, the grinders, the furnaces, etc., drying companies, whatever, obviously the electricals and the furnace hot areas, all these things need to be watched, and the condition of those bits of equipment needs to be in good working operation. Lastly, I put there signage. So obviously signage can tell you when something's hot. It can say you can't go into this area, for instance, if you don't have the appropriate PPE, and tell you what you need to wear, whether that be glasses, steel caps, gloves, whatever. Next. So the challenges in our laboratory is often around the quality. So one of the things is typing errors, typos, people writing down numbers where it's difficult to read numbers or words, even reading from submitted samples, for instance. So it's important that if you can use some form of electronic processes. One of those is called LIMS, obviously, but it could be that you're using Excel. There can still be typos, but at least a system where you can type something once and it can follow through the whole system is probably the best advice. For calibrations, you need to make sure that your processes for calibrating instruments, the actual calibration materials themselves, are in good condition, they are correct, and all these things need to be recorded. When you're using equipment, obviously you need to be aware of the condition they're in and look at the maintenance schedule. Has somebody maintained that instrument? Is there a signature on the side of the instrument or machine to say it was last tested in February 2024? So it's 12 months old, maybe it should be recalibrated, maybe it should be retested. The handling of data, I can't stress too much how many mistakes happen at this stage, and we're talking quality. So you want to be able to handle the data, and you want to be able to look at the data as you're doing the process. You want to look at it at the end of the day. How has the samples gone through? And you want to be looking at it during the week. You're also probably going to be giving a monthly report to your supervisor of the laboratory to say how well you've performed. So laboratory quality is important. Next. Looking here at our inefficiencies and costs. So what's our inefficiencies? Largely, it's not utilising staff efficiently, because when you've got somebody there and they're waiting for something to happen, you're still paying for that person to wait there. Could they be doing something else? Are they informed? You need to process your bottlenecks. You need to make sure that if you're using software, if you're using a LIMS, is it operational? Is it working? Is there somebody maintaining it? Is it your storage area where you're storing all your equipment? Make sure that it's easy to see so that you know when you run out of products, so that you are ordering and replacing those items as you go. It could be drying with your drying capacity for samples and the type of drying that you're using. It could be your equipment. Is it fit for purpose? Are you using the right bit of equipment to test the samples? Then we talk about consumable wastage. You need to make sure that we're not throwing away stuff that's good, but on the other hand, are your consumables the right consumables so that they can last longer? Equipment failures, is the maintenance kept up to schedule? Because if a machine's down, you can't use it. So therefore, you've got people hanging around waiting for that to be fixed before it can be utilised. Either that or they can't do that process. So maybe they put that aside. So that's a problem for another day. You've also got rework and retesting. So we've got lots of potential for the samples failed the test work. You've gone back, you've redone the sample process all over again. That's a cost of time, and obviously that's an inefficiency and therefore a cost in finance to the business. Next. So challenges in our business is often around staffing, and that's making sure that you have the appropriate levels of staffing to perform whatever works you have operating at the time. You need to make sure that they have been trained to do the work that you need performed. Ideally, they're all trained in the same sort of fashion with the same technique. And therefore, you want to have written methods so that the staff can follow the method and perform the work in a similar fashion. So you're more likely to get a similar outcome for your testing. You need to look at your shift work. So obviously your staff might need to be on night shift and day shift. They might need to do 1 week on, 1 week off. They might need to do 2 weeks on, 1 week off. So all those things you need to be aware and watch for fatigue and make sure that staff are there and present, because working as a single person on a shift, if that person's sick, obviously there's not going to be any results that day. If they're with 2 people and 1 person's sick, you're leaving all the work to 1 person and there's a safety concern there. So teamwork is important. You need your staff to know who to contact and when, and they need to know what they're doing for that person so that they're providing their part of the work at the right time frame. If you don't have the right teamwork, it can be a whole bunch of rework that's done that's wasted time and effort. Access to software. If you happen to have a LIMS format, it's very useful because you can put the information into the LIMS. That means that you don't have to keep writing down that sample number on a piece of paper, because you can just print the paper and you can follow it through the system. You can barcode these things and you can actually follow it from right through to the end. And then at the end, you can make sure that you've just printed out the final results, or email it or text it or send it internally to the clients that need the data. Levels appropriate for sampling regime. So make sure that the staff know what they need to do for that side of it as well, because they may need to go into the plant and do sampling. There is also turnaround time constraints, and some mines will want their data back within 24 hours. Some might want it back in 12 hours. It could well be that they've got something really, really serious in the plant and they might want to have it back as soon as possible, which might mean 20 minutes, an hour. It might not be possible, but they'll want it as soon as possible because they may need to stop a part of the plant and stop the commodity from being thrown away out to tailings. Next. So we're talking today about a laboratory audit potential. Why would you want to do that? We've just covered a whole bunch of things that are important in laboratories. And in the laboratory audit, we will look at each item. So the safety, the quality, the method consistency, the equipment that's being used, the cost of the various aspects, and the staffing. Are they appropriate for what's being performed? The benefits for you could be identifying incorrect methodologies. If it's the wrong methodology, it could be therefore something we could look at to improve the speed at getting the data through your system. We're looking at the different gaps in knowledge. We're also reviewing your safety and any inefficiencies that we can bring up or identify while there's an audit happening. The other thing is we like to try to make sure that if there's any regulatory or compliance issues that we can inform you that maybe there's an issue here. We also want to help give you enhancement in the confidence with any data that you're processing, so that when the people gets the result, they look at it, they go, yep, we're confident the data's there. Why are they confident? They can see that perhaps you've performed some standards, the standards are in the range they should be, and you've therefore able to actually act on that data rather than go back to the lab and say, no, I need you to rerun that because I don't believe the data, which could be a loss again to the plant if they haven't realised that the data is correct. So therefore there's an inefficiency, and the number of tonnes that might go out to tailings, that could represent thousands, tens of thousands, millions of dollars worth gone to waste. So to keep your lab, your heart of your operation operating and performing good data quickly is pretty important. Next.
All right, so we've got another survey, guys. So if you pick up your mobile phones, if you've still got the page open, it should refresh. Otherwise, please just rescan the QR code. So we're keen to hear from everybody on the call, how frequently are you conducting your laboratory audits? Remember, this is anonymous, but we're kind of, keen to hear, is it annually? Is it every few years? Is it, only for compliance, or, never? And we say that kind of tongue in cheek, but, sometimes it's not even considered if you, especially for mine site laboratories that are, they're not focused on, ISO accreditation. As Rob has pointed out, it's obviously also important, for many other aspects of your laboratory, and we'll continue to dive into those. So thank you, everybody, for your responses. And back to you, Rob.
Okay. So just talking through an on-site audit success story where I was 4 years ago, I was up on a site doing an audit for a gold mining group. They're in the Wiluna region. They had set up quite a good complex fire assay laboratory where they needed fairly fast assays so that their gold numbers would make sense and they could be confident that the plant's operating. So they were doing grade control numbers and they were doing plant samples. The grade control needed to be out within 24 hours. And observing the sample prep area, I just went into where they used LM5 machines are, and I just noticed that there didn't seem to be any documentation as to when they were replacing the bowls. With the LM5s, you don't actually take the bowl out between samples. It's just permanently in the machine, but you do change out the pucks. So there's one puck that goes in the machine and you mill the sample and then you do the next sample, etc., etc. What I didn't understand is how they were knowing when to change their bowls. So I actually requested that they remove one of the bowls so as I could inspect it. And when we took it out, it had holes. I could actually see daylight going through the bottom of the bowl. So it was probably well overdue for a change. And I asked them, so how do they find out when it's due? And they said, well, they didn't really think about it too much. So I started a protocol for them that they weighed the pucks, because we do know that if you use two pucks on separate days, so you use one puck today and then you switch that out for another puck, it's got to wear into a certain sort of a groove, otherwise you don't get good grinding in a bowl. And then they weigh those pucks, and they weighed them at least once or twice a week and recorded that information. And once the pucks got down to 10 kilos, 11 kilos, They start at 19 kilos, so they've actually worn out the bowl. So that's the time when you actually take the bowl out and you throw it away and you put a new bowl in and use 2 new packs again, back to the 19 kilos. So they put that into their process and they started recording, and it was no surprise. They had 5 machines. They changed all 5 bowls. All 5 bowls had holes in them. So that was obviously a concern, because if they've got holes in the bottom, that sample gets caught underneath the bowl, between the bowl and the plate. And if it's a high grade and then followed by a low grade, you get cross-contamination and you get lost sample. Next. So what we recommend looking at the audit process is ideally a 5-day site visit. It gives the person a chance, gives me a chance, if I'm the person doing the audit, to review the various processes, to look at the methods that are preferably written. Maybe even before I attend, I can actually look at some of the methodology, and then actually attend with a person that's doing the process, watch that they're actually doing what's written down on the process, and look at all the different steps that they're doing, have a look at the equipment, have a look at the safety, the signage, have a look at their PPE, and looking at the conditions of the laboratory and where they're at, just in case there are things that need to be attended to, concern for dangers. We then do an audit report at the end of the 5-day visit, which I would then present to the audit requester. We then say, look to do a follow-up meeting to talk about the audit report and try to deal with any queries and try to work forward with any progress. We then try to talk to the requester to work out what their schedule would be, so that we can look at, maybe we need to do 12 monthly audits. It could be, if you've never had an audit, you may need to do a 6 monthly and then follow up with a 12 monthly after that, to sort of get the schedule on track and to ensure some sort of consistency in the facility. Next. So what are the risks of skipping audits? One of the major ones tends to be safety. People become a bit happy to just, oh yeah, I haven't got my safety glasses on, or I'm not wearing gloves, or haven't got appropriate steel caps on. And as that becomes lapse, people start to get hurt. And when people get hurt, not only is there lost time, there is also not good for the person being hurt. And it just becomes a big problem, because you've then got to find somebody else to do that process until they get themselves back. And that person obviously doesn't want to go home any worse off than when they came to work in the morning. So it's just one of those things you just need to continually do. There's obviously costs to that. There's also a confidence. There's an impact on decision making and operational errors and the speed at which you can make those decisions. There's financial losses from the non-compliance or inefficiencies, and you also may be falling behind industry standards. You could be missing out on technological advancements. On a further site that I spent some time, where they had installed an ICP, the data was released in 36 hours from delivery to the site, which was fine for them at their grade control requirements. But for the guys in the mill, they needed results between 3 and 6 hours from delivery to the lab. Well, it takes nearly 32 hours to process, digest, and run the samples through that ICP and then get it QC'd and be confident with the data. So the best they could do was 32 hours. So I looked at that, and I looked at a way that they could do XRF management with the handheld, and they were able to lease the handheld operation. We were able to set it up so that we were confident with the data. And what we did is we followed that up with the 36-hour ICP data at the end to make sure that the data we were releasing in 3 hours was competent and gave the guys in the mill pretty good numbers. So they built up a confidence, and therefore they are able to use the XRF and get 3-hour data and then make changes in the mill if needed. So some of those things, it's about having confidence in technological information and knowing about what can be done in your facility. Next.
Some really good points, Rob. So again, just our last survey, do you plan to implement any changes in your lab based on what you've learnt today? Is it a yes immediately, yes in the future, no, but I'll consider it, and no, I don't see the need. So obviously we're keen to present this to everybody in that are professional laboratory staff, not just people that are our current customers. I think Rob's brought up some really interesting points about the importance of running regular laboratory audits, and obviously the risks of not doing that as well. So I think safety is quite important for all mine sites and all laboratory staff as well. All right, thank you for your responses there. So, look, if you are interested in getting Datamine to help you with your laboratory audits, and you'd like a free consultation, go ahead and say yes in the chat, and we'll contact you. Or either you can just email me on dion.borg@dataminesoftware.com. Beck will pop that into the chat now. So that's the end of our presentations today. So thank you everybody that attended live, and also those people that are listening to our recording. We're happy to have feedback.